All right, hi everyone. We're working on a user test facility for low energy building systems. My name's Andrew Kukov. My partners are Phil, Kula, and Patrick. So this is a facility being developed by LB&L to help makers of energy efficiency products have a place to test and continue to develop their technologies. So first, let's look at the demand. Commercial buildings are some of the largest energy consumers in the world. They consume 37% of all the electricity in the United States, and this is 21% of the total energy use. This is 18% of the United States carbon footprint, and you can see on the graph on the right that this number is growing over time. But this isn't just an environmental concern. This is also a giant financial pain point. Building owners spend over $120 billion every single year paying their energy bills. So energy-saving technologies are really important in this space. Now, the building renovation and new building construction industries are well posed to buy these technologies and to install them. These two segments spend over $1 trillion every year. They're 13.4% of US GDP. So what our product is, it's this test facility. It allows companies to bring in their energy-efficient systems, put it in the facility, test it, get results, get validation, performance numbers. This helps them continue their development. They can show this to their customers and to potential sponsors or VCs, for example. And I should note that a lot of the customers we spoke to are very excited about this technology, and Pulak will tell you more about that later in the presentation. So this is a picture of what the facility actually looks like. It consists of 6 to 8 of these test beds that you see on the screen. And the key feature is that each test bed consists of interchangeable parts. So you can swap out the roof, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the windows, the lighting system, the ventilation system, and so on. It's fully interchangeable. Each test bed also consists of 2 cells, which allows you to do controlled experiments. So in one cell you do the experimental setup, and another one is the control. Very carefully scientific approach here. Two of the test beds are special in that one is rotational, so you can get different angles of sun. Another is 2 floors high, so you can test equipment that requires that extra height. And these are a live environment, meaning that humans can actually be part of the experiment potentially. They can be in the room, or they can come in and see how equipment is actually installed. At the same time, we're collecting measurements. We have energy use, temperature, air quality, lighting, and so on being collected, which allows companies to do careful experiments here. This is a blown-out picture of sort of all the different parts that make up each of these test cells and the key features of the facility. So the first, like I mentioned, is flexibility. We can swap out many different parts here, windows, lights, so on. We're not as focused on HVAC because those often require specialized, larger facilities. But almost anything else, this is a very general facility. Integration is another key aspect. This means that we can actually bring together components from different vendors or from different types of components and test them all together, which is often rarely done in an individual lab setting. Next, we allow interaction. So like I said, people can come into the facility, see how equipment is actually installed, get a feel for how it works. Or they can actually be part of the experiment. You can have somebody simulating an office environment inside the facility and ask how it feels, how does the equipment work. Control, like I said, this allows very controlled experiments, and it's a unique place between doing experiments in the lab, where you can have a lot of control over your experiment, but it's not very realistic, and doing experiments sort of at an installed site or a user site where, of course, it's very realistic, but you don't have much control over the experiment. You can't go playing with the lights or as much of the temperature. So this is a sweet spot right in the middle, which gives you the best of both worlds. And finally, standards. LB&L is following building code standards from different time periods, so customers can actually pick the configuration that best fits their product. Now, as we've heard before, LB&L is not quite a typical company. They're doing this not to make money. This is not for profit. Instead, their goal is to support emerging efficiency technologies and to accelerate them to get them to market as quickly as possible. So their question is, how do they provide value to potential users of this facility? How do they drive demand for this facility? And that's the goal of our presentation, to answer that. And now Phil will take us through a use case of the facility.
Thanks, Andrew. So in terms of understanding use characteristics and needs of these users, it's important to understand how a specific user might want to use this facility. So let's take an LED company, for example. They have an exciting new technology, and they've been doing some small lab-scale tests, but have not gotten any sort of real-world data. And so a lot of the stakeholders they're speaking with, utilities, end users, builders, and investors, they want to know how might this work in a more realistic environment. And so the facility would be a perfect test bed to run some tests. And so the company may come to the facility and say, okay, a month or so would be an ideal time period to work over. We're a small company. We certainly need support from LBNL. So LBNL would be equipped to manage, run, set up the tests. And as long as the tests were not proprietary and the research could be published, most of these tests would be free of charge. And then the company could, like Andrew was saying, swap out the shell of the building. They could choose, do they want a 1970s facade? Do they want a more modern facade with lots of windows? Do they want to integrate a control algorithm into the test? Do they want a certain HVAC system? Do they want any other systems involved in their integrated test? And that ultimately will give them a real sweet spot between the lab and the real world. So the lab obviously is very controlled, and the real world is very variable, and it's difficult to get good measurements. And this product really hits the sweet spot right in between those two. And ultimately, the data and reports that come out of this should improve the value story of this product, and the company may even develop a potential partnership during the process. So some of the data that does come out of these tests should really inform and drive marketing and commercialization strategy. There's obviously a wealth of raw data that comes out of the test. Everything from energy use, cost savings, lighting levels, temperature, etc. And a lot of this data could potentially be extrapolated to larger spaces or different spaces. It should also help with system calibration, so getting feedback during the test, understanding, okay, we put 3 light fixtures in this space. Is that correct? Maybe during the day, only two are necessary. Maybe at night, 4 are necessary. So the ability to calibrate the system in conjunction with all the other integrated systems involved in the facility. And finally, understanding variability. So the test would run over a period of days, months, potentially longer. And so understanding within a day, what is the variability you see? Within the month, is there changes from day to day? And also the effect of occupancy on these tests. Does human occupancy change things dramatically? And so this, again, would really give you some more realistic data to push your product more quickly to market. And so in this project, we looked at a number of different users and wanted to understand how they would use the facility and what value they would derive from it. And so you can see here, a hypothesis of ours was that these different users will use the facility differently, and they will see different value returned to them from the facility, from these tests that they run. So the first group of the first segment of users that we looked at was by technology maturity. And so we wanted to, from early stage to late stage, and early stage being they've developed a prototype, they have a model, they may have done some small-scale lab tests, but they have not really gotten out into the world very much, all the way to later stage, which are products that are already on the market, and understanding, do these companies want to use the facility? What value do they see in it? And then our second area was technology type, so understanding whether windows and facades versus lighting versus any control or software algorithms that may want to test here, what different use and value do they see in this facility. And I'll turn it over to Patrick now to discuss further about some of the trends and results that we saw.
Thanks, Phil. All right, so as Phil mentioned, we did a user segmentation based on technology maturity. And this is to answer the key questions of who are the ideal users and how can we best position our facility to meet those users' needs. Oops. There we go. All right, so we did this type of user segmentation and measured across 6 of the key user benefits of the facility. And so I'll just really quickly walk through what each of these 6 are, just to give you an idea. So the first one is technical validation, and that refers to the ability to put some quantitative analysis behind claims of energy efficiency. So if a company comes in and they say, you know, our windows will be 15% more efficient than the competitors, this facility allows those users to be able to put some quantitative data to support that. Then there's the flexibility piece, which, as Andrew alluded to earlier, refers to the ability to easily configure the facility, put in products, take them out, the ability to integrate multiple components and test them together. LB&L will also be able to facilitate partnerships as part of this service. A lot of the smaller companies in particular are really interested in getting in touch and connected with other manufacturers, as well as getting access to research organizations and government organizations such as the DOE. There's also the stamp of approval, and this refers to the fact that when you test this facility, you are associated and collaborating with LB&L, which is a nationally reputable research organization, and also having association with the University of California, Berkeley, which is, as you know, a world-class university. There's also the fact that you'll get access to the scientists at LB&L, and really being able to tap into that high level of expertise. And then finally, customer interaction, which refers to the ability to bring in your customers if you're testing a product, have them walk through the facility, really see things for themselves, and get that whole experience. So when we did this user segmentation, we noticed some interesting trends. We noticed, for example, that there was a high level of value that some of the early to mid-stage companies saw in the flexibility and the partnerships piece. We also noticed that there was a lot of the later stage companies found value in the stamp of approval and the customer interaction piece. So different users kind of related more or less to different needs. Overall, there was a high level of interest basically across the board between all these segments. But we found a slightly higher level of interest coming from the early to mid-stage companies, and that may be because that some of the late-stage companies they're conglomerates like Siemens, and they have their own test facilities, and I'll get into that in just a few slides. So we also did a similar type of user segmentation based on technology type. We looked at a couple of different segments: building fenestration segment, windows facades, controls and software, lighting, and builders and architects. And we measured along the same 6 benefits. And we found that there was a slightly higher level of interest coming from the windows facades and the lighting sectors. I will also mention that you might notice we don't have HVAC on here, and I think Andrew talked about that earlier. And that's we through our research we found out that HVAC companies tend to require larger facilities to test in, and so this facility may not be best suited for that. However, you can install an HVAC unit in the LB&L's facility. To have really a thorough analysis, we also had a look at what the other alternatives are to testing at LB&L's facility. Perhaps the simplest alternative is that you can just not test in a facility. And so, we do have to acknowledge that a lot of smaller companies may be limited in terms of budget constraints. They may be limited in time and experience, and they may choose to test either through a simulation or just test in a traditional lab setting. There are also other facilities out there. There's about depending on how you define it, there's about 10 other energy efficiency facilities. They're basically spread across the country. Most of them have particular, very specific focuses. So there's facilities that focus primarily on thermal testing. There's ones that are Windows focused. There are a very small handful of facilities that do offer a similar kind of integrated approach where you can test different kinds of products and test the integration between products. And one example of that is the Oak Ridge National Labs in Tennessee. There's also a third alternative, which is a lot of the big conglomerates, you know, the Philips, the GEs, the Siemens of the world. They have their own portfolios of test facilities, and so a lot of these larger companies tend to do their testing in-house. So we wanted to compare LB&L's future facility to some of the other options that are out there. And again, we did this kind of thing with looking across the six key benefits of LB&L's facility. And we found that on every account, LB&L's facility either matched or exceeded what was offered by these other facilities. Most other facilities, they offer technical validation. As I mentioned, Oak Ridge and a few others do offer some level of flexibility in terms of configuring different components. And they're also mostly associated with either large universities or other research organizations. So those are things that where LB&L can match. Where we think LB&L can really excel is in these bottom three. The first one, partnerships. Being in the Bay Area, we have the advantage that LB&L is located near all these VC firms, a lot of the clean tech businesses that are in the Bay. And so it's part of the great LB&L network that users will be able to tap into. Also, because this facility is going to be fairly decently sized, it's going to be larger than most of the other facilities out there, and because it's designed to test multiple products, not just specific products, there will be a wealth of knowledge and of data that will be accumulated as this facility continues to operate. And so users of this facility will be able to tap into that expertise, will be able to leverage the scientists here at LB&L. And so that, I think, is really going to be a great selling point. And then lastly, customer interaction. A lot of the facilities out there are not as accessible. They tend to be in more remote areas. This one is located right here in Berkeley. And so, it's really designed to be external facing. Customers will be able to come in and really experience the facility firsthand. And now I'll hand it over to Pulak to talk a little bit more about the feedback that we received from some of our potential users.
Thanks, Patrick. So we conducted interviews with potential users to gauge interest in the facility, and were able to speak with about 20 potential users. And while this certainly doesn't account for the entire industry, we do feel as though we saw a strong trend. So of the companies that we interviewed, about 40% do not currently test in facilities, and this mainly consists of early and mid-stage companies. And of these, 80% expressed interest in working with LB&L. And some of the feedback that we received includes a Windows company saying, "It sounds like this facility was built for us. We want to be the first customer." So definitely strong interest on this side. Of the companies that do currently test in facilities, 100% expressed interest in working with LB&L. And this mainly consists of later stage companies who use such facilities for product validation as well as customer interaction testing. And some of the feedback that we received includes a lighting company saying, "We are very interested. Real-world application testing is so important." It's also important to note that some of these later stage companies also use such facilities for R&D testing. For example, Siemens tests 90% of its products in-house, but tests its niche and R&D products externally. So while the prior slide shows that there's substantial interest across the board, through our interviews and user benefit analysis, we think that there are certain users that the facility can target to generate the greatest interest and get the most number of companies in the facility. So on the product category side, LB&L should focus on windows facades and lighting companies. And these companies greatly value technical validation and customer interaction, which are key offerings of the facility. And on the product lifecycle stage, early and mid-stage companies are most interested in the facility, and they primarily value flexibility through integration and partnership facilitation, which are resources that LBNL can provide. So based on user feedback, we found some attributes that LBNL can incorporate to be optimal in users' eyes. And moving from the top left here, the first is hands-on operational and maintenance support. We found that users want LBNL to do the heavy lifting. And as far as current facilities go, the service ranges from a do-it-yourself approach to offering full service. So we think that by offering the most hands-on support possible, LBNL can really stand out. The second is scientist expertise. Users also really want LBNL experts to address product challenges, so we think this should be an offering of the facility. Third, we think that there should be an advisory board of key users and LBNL executives to determine how to best direct and market the facility. We also found that companies really value duration, and this is important to them, and it also varies a lot from company to company as far as what the needs are. So LBNL should focus on offering convenient and flexible scheduling. And lastly, as Patrick mentioned earlier, users really want LBNL to connect them to both industry and government partners. So partnership facilitation should be a key offering as well. In conclusion, this facility addresses a huge need to reduce the energy consumption in the U.S. As was earlier mentioned, commercial buildings account for 30% of electricity use in the country. LBNL can help bring cutting-edge efficiency products to market more quickly through this real-world application testing, allowing for both the control of a lab while at the same time being able to offer simulated real-world conditions. Also through integrated testing, complete with interchangeable parts, and also with measurement and performance data that users can then provide to VCs, builders, and the ultimate end users. We also really want to highlight the potential users that we've spoken to are very interested in the facility. And lastly, as LBNL considers its service offering and its marketing strategy, it should consider that its competitive advantage is that it can offer partnership facilitation, testing expertise, and customer interaction testing. And also its key targets are windows, facades, and lighting companies, as well as early and mid-stage technologies. So we'd like to thank you for your time and open up for any questions.
Hi, very interesting. Thank you. Two questions. The first, it seems like this presentation was focused on marketing and getting people into this facility, but it strikes me that one of the issues might be allocating scarce access to the facility, that there'll be excess demand. So I wonder if you focused on the marketing instead of the allocation for a reason, if you knew that it wouldn't be scarce. And the second question, I guess if I'm DOE and I'm sponsoring this, I would want not just to satisfy kind of current users on a one-off basis, but actually to collect data on where a facility like this is really useful. So you might imagine that, you know, with lighting systems, tests you do in the lab are very similar to tests you do at a facility like this, so you can skip this facility. So if, you know, with repeat lighting applications, this facility can give you feedback on where you really need an intermediate step like this. I think that'd be useful.
I can start with your second point. So the collecting the data. So the way LBNL intends to run this facility, they would prefer that the customers, in most cases, they want the customers to be able to release their data and actually do publishable experiments. And in fact, in that case, they hope to provide the service for free. So certainly the data collection and all the scientific, the sort of experimental side of it is a very big part of their offering.
And to that end, sort of creating a database of results from these projects would be something that down the road, after several years of existence, could be a really valuable takeaway for LBNL, for the DOE, for potential other users. So.
Yeah, and I could try to address your first question, which was, how do you handle excess demand when you have more users than you can really have space for? We certainly hope that's true. Excess demand would be a great thing. We've spoke to a number of other labs to see how they handled that kind of situation, and we've really found a diverse range of models. There were labs that just did it simply as first come, first serve. There were labs that had kind of a prioritization system where they prioritized academic users over commercial ones. So that really a conversation that we are going to be having with our scientists to really see kind of what fits their goals the best. But we are aware that there are different models that they could potentially use, and they will all achieve different effects essentially.
I asked earlier with regard to a previous presentation about the targets in California and elsewhere as well for zero net energy construction. And I think it's very interesting you're looking at lighting and the windows and facades. I think that's great. But there's a whole additional area that I didn't specifically hear addressed I was curious about. There's a ton of work going on with modular construction, companies like Living Homes based in Santa Monica, which happens to be residential. And to address their technology test needs, we would need to look at things like insulation and wall and ceiling modules, exterior coatings, radiant barriers, everything that completely transforms the way the building shell is built over the next 8 years. It's a fairly short window of opportunity on the residential side. I'm curious if those sorts of modules or, what I call more significant integral pieces of the building are addressable in this facility, or the roof and walls are fixed and you can only play with what sits inside of it in the windows.
So they are definitely addressable. You saw that blowout diagram where everything came off of the building. So tests the user can basically decide, do they want a 1970s style facade? Do they want a more modern facade? So the coatings, the insulation, all that stuff is interchangeable and fairly easily. That's the idea of the facility. Design it so it's fairly easy to interchange any of these parts.
And were the builders part of your testing group you pulled? I didn't see them with their own category.
Yeah, we spoke with a number of builders, and a lot of the key feedback was that the integration was a real important part. So understanding how all of these different systems work together, because it's great to know that this insulation doesn't allow this much heat in, but understanding how it works in a more realistic environment was something that they really valued, and being able to set that very specifically up was important to them.
Phil, one more over here. I'm curious, in terms of the sort of service of providing a certification around product efficiency and different metrics, clearly there's a lot of value to that in terms of LB&L leveraging its reputation, but is there also a trade-off in terms of sort of the liability then of becoming this decider? I know, for example, NREL, when they do a lot of their photovoltaic testing, they've become sort of the de facto standard, but at the same time they try to shy away a little bit from providing any type of guarantee behind that. How do you guys see kind of the trade-off between those two?
So I think we spoke with the PG&E Food Center, and they have over the years become the standard for testing food equipment, and I think that is ultimately, I guess, would be a great thing if this facility could determine and set standards for efficiency products. I don't think we've really looked specifically at that, but I think it would be, there may be liability behind that, but I think it would be a great step in the direction of the DOE's goals to push efficiency technologies to market as quickly as possible. Having standards is a big part of that, and so I think this facility would be a great means to get there.
Thank you.